Hey everyone, welcome back to OnBase. I am your host, Chris Moody, and today I'm very excited to talk to Caroline Quinn on optimizing your account-based marketing strategy. Caroline, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we were just hanging out. I always like to start this giving you a completely open-ended question that you can take anywhere, but I'd love for you to describe your journey to folks. What led you to what you're doing today?
Sure. So I started my marketing career 10 years ago at Kronos Incorporated, which is now UKG, rebranded to UKG. Um, I then went to a company called Pipeline IQ, which is where I really grew my expertise in account-based marketing. We helped ABM teams and sellers shape strategies to get into their most complex accounts and markets. So from there, I went back in-house to the corporate side with ABM roles at Blue Yonder, Zora, and now Cloudflare. So definitely very specialized in ABM focus over the last 7 years, but I've gotten to see it in so many different contexts and, gotten to see on the sort of agency, more consultancy side with Pipeline IQ and now in-house and just different formats of how that comes to life. So gotten to see like quite a range of strategies to make ABM successful in different environments.
I love it. And you said range, the range of strategies, which let's unpack that a little bit. We know that account tiering is real. So with account based, we have to figure out what do we do for each group of accounts and find that right framework so that we're optimizing our resources and getting our return on investment. Let's set the problem first. So what happens if we have the wrong mix for account based, and how does that impact revenue acceleration and customer acquisition costs?
Good question. So if you over, I guess for a lot of people define ABM as there's a triangle sort of graph, one-to-one strategic ABMs at the top with fully custom programs built for just one account. In the middle, you have one to few. That can look really different depending on where you go, but the more targeted, segmented, maybe it's 10 accounts, maybe it's 100 accounts. It depends on kind of the layout of your organization. And then one to many or programmatic ABM is more ABM at scale, helps a lot to have tech to run that. But that's generally the three tiers that you would see in any given ABM program. If you are building out a program and you over rotate on the highly customized one-to-one programs, you can risk spending a lot of resources and budget against a small number of accounts that, if awareness and reach is your biggest challenge, you spent a lot on a small number of logos, less at bats, less awareness. Meanwhile, if you over rotate on programmatic, that might blur in with what you might already be running from a demand gen perspective. You don't get to build that sort of trusted advisor type relationship with your sellers if you're only running programmatic ABM. So I think one of the best skills that an account-based marketer can have is to go into an organization and help diagnose what the right mix is and how should those three tiers be defined for your company and the goals and challenges that they have. It just looks so different everywhere you go. There's really no way to rinse and repeat exactly what worked at your last organization or what you learned in a certification. You have to have a very good discovery process as an account-based marketer.
I love that. I was going to key in on something different in the discovery process. That's a really, really great thing to talk about. I'm going to come back to that one. I think we should unpack the discovery process and curiosity. I do think there's a strong correlation between the most curious folks in marketing and the highest success rate. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But when we think about those tiers, you talked about the pyramid and having the three sections, right? If we have that triangle and we have the pyramid, one thing that I saw early on in account based, a lot of folks assumed that those lines were rigid and locked forever. And if you're in tier 3 or tier C, that's what you get. Like you're a one to many account forever and ever, amen. See, you wouldn't want to be a kind of thing. But we know now that we have fluidity between those tiers. And I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the signals and triggers that you look for to signal that someone should move from one tier to another?
That's a good point. I think it sets you up as a marketer for success to have the flexibility between those tiers. Um, there's two different viewpoints on it. One is you need technology to help you do it. Technology helps you do it. It's an input to it. It's not the only way to do it. I think if you don't have a ABM platform, you can work with your team internally to define what those inputs on accounts and what those account behaviors should look like. So, for instance, maybe you want to have a tier of pre-opportunity new logo accounts, and those get treated a certain way through a one-to-few or one-to-many play. And then you have accounts that are already in the middle of a sales cycle with your team that shows higher intent and higher engagement. Obviously, there's something going on, a project to address with them. And then maybe you have another segment of like customers that have a high NPS score that look like a good fit for a cross-sell or upsell. None of those require a platform to help you do it. It's if you have one, it's even easier to segment them and to kind of watch their behaviors and move them between those tiers. But it is possible to do it manually, and it's having the flexibility to track that and define it from the start with your leadership team and sales, again, sales priorities. It will make you more flexible and more aligned to the priorities of the business across the board. If you do have a platform like a demand base, you can build it out so that accounts are moving dynamically without you having to get involved, or at least you're getting alerted to the fact that, hey, maybe this one-to-few account looks more like a one-to-one now. They're behaving more like a one-to-one now, or an opportunity opens that means we put them into the next, tier or a deal acceleration play. So, for instance, if you have 1,000 accounts in your ABM program, with an ABM platform, you can ensure coverage across all 1,000 with some kind of digital campaign. And then as maybe you have the accounts that engage with that always on program get bumped up into a one-to-few program where it's on the industry level or it's on the product level, depending on their intent. And then say you have your top 5 that you're going to do one-to-one no matter what. They're their must-win sales accounts that even if there's no intent, you're still, must have logos. You can watch those accounts in that middle tier to decide, should we rotate off some of those one-to-ones? Should we consider some in the middle tier to be bumped up into the one-to-one program? So in a perfect world, you have the tech to help you do this at massive scale, and you're not constantly watching, manually the behavior of those accounts. But I think that's why the discovery process, as we talked about a second ago, is so important, so that what am I looking for? Because in a world where you can watch a million different behaviors in an account, what are the most important to your organization? Because otherwise you might go down a bunch of paths that don't actually, it doesn't help you sell it internally if you make it too complicated. So it helps to keep it simple, I would say.
Yeah, great points. And you actually did a little bit of foreshadowing too. When we talked about the mix, I did hear you say, you might be spending money on accounts that are going to get that from account based in your demand gen, like with your advertising spend. So really smart move there, the callback. But the discovery point, I'm really interested in some of the things that are not core marketing skills that you think are capabilities we have to work cross-functionally and to make account-based successful. So you've talked a little bit about discovery, which in my head, I'm going straight to curiosity, but what are some of the traits or skills that you think someone has to have to be successful with account-based today?
I think the most important, in my opinion, and what I think has helped me in my career, is be a really, really good listener. Think like a salesperson. ABM is new to a lot of people, and if it's not new to them, it might have looked different at their last organization. So make it easy for the seller to engage with you, especially with a one-to-one program where you're super reliant on the rep for information. You're the quarterback among a bunch of different marketing functions to drive forward a targeted program. You work with every part of the business as an account-based marketer, from CSMs to the sales team to, executives that are jumping in to be a spokesperson for you guys. Like, there's just no part of the organization that you don't interact with as an ABMer. So I think being a great listener, sort of thinking about the audience as you talk about things internally is important. Treat your organization like you would want your seller to treat their target account. That will help you build the right shaped ABM program from the start, but it also will help you get people really excited about being part of it. That I think is a major just skill for people to develop, is like really diagnosing the right kind of way to work with the organization. And then I think having a comfort level with marketing technology, not necessarily to the point of like a marketing ops person, but how can you, as an ABMer, use the tools that you already have across the business to move your own goals forward? If you're lucky enough to have a big dedicated ABM budget, that's great. If you don't, using the tech that is already in place or the tools that are already in place is a great way to try to bridge that gap too.
Awesome stuff. And I like ABM, or I feel like we should make a shirt. And you hit on the golden rule too. We need to do some custom swag here. I do have a hookup. If you want to make a shirt, I can put it in our store. So let me know. But one thing I'm curious about as we think about the tiers, and we know through what you described, and most of the folks listening are doing this, but when we have an account that's extremely important, we should be spending more money on that account. So we have higher time involvement, higher spend involvement, because we know that that account is even more important to our business for various reasons, depending on our signals. How do you think about justifying the higher investment of those account based programs that are the one to one programs to your stakeholders? Are there any tips that you'd love to share with the audience?
Yeah, so sometimes you get lucky and your organization is all in on one-to-one, and you can just run with it. And when it doesn't work, it's fine. Just try it again with a different account. Most of the time, that's not going to be true in my experience, as it shouldn't be. It's expensive. I think it makes sense not to go like to over rotate on one-to-one. Um, I think having a strong a strong opinion or kind of hypothesis on what makes a good one-to-one account for your organization is really important. Um, One-to-one ABM can be like a secret weapon in the right context, the right environment. Sellers love it, and it really embeds you into the account team, builds the trust with the account team. It's the thing that makes you think like a seller as a marketer. But the risk is, like we talked about, overinvesting the marketing resources on a single account when, one, if there's already pipeline in the account, would you have won it anyway without the marketing help? Maybe. If you lose the deal, you spent all this time working the deal. So it can be a riskier way to go about it if your marketing organization is not all in on one-to-one. So the way I like to do it is try to judge that up front and lean toward programmatic and one to few if it's not an automatic yes on one to one. And also, if you do have a one to one mix, try to balance it out with the one to few on demand style ABM programs where you're offsetting that risk by having, if a rep comes to you with a great account, you have a couple campaigns in your back pocket that you can run against that play instead of coming up with something from scratch. Or can you use, like in the past, I've used a tool like Demandbase to say, hey, here's the signals we're seeing in this account. That's why we think this is a high propensity account. We should invest more in it. Just all the data that you can get to justify why you want to spend more. Once you start the campaign, don't come up with a 12-month plan. Take it a chunk at a time and say, okay, well, for a month, we're going to run awareness and try to get in the door. If nothing happens, we're not going to spin our wheels on it. We'll just refocus on a different account or just refocus on one to few, one to many. I think there's ways you can dip your toe into it without, overcommitting to it. And that will help de-risk it and hopefully get more buy-in for one-to-one in general.
Great. And I love you hit on attribution too. I saw a video today, a LinkedIn video that was someone essentially doing the crime, trying to solve a crime, like pinning things all over a board and trying to prove marketing attribution.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that one.
It's an adventure for ABM, I think. It's very the best the best thing you can do is like, can you meet the attribution model while also gathering all the anecdotal feedback and patterns and data that you can to tell the story over time, especially for one-to-one where, you know, I had a situation where we would let reps nominate accounts for one-to-one, and often they wanted to work on accounts where they had large opportunities. So most of the one-to-one work went towards existing pipeline instead of going to find that new pipeline. So I think you can kind of like one-to-one can be a little bit of a trap. I think it's so much fun to work on. It's you really feel part of the deal when you're in it, and when you win it, it's fun. It's fun as a marketer, but it can be a hard balance, I think, between the two.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, for you, this is probably going back in the time machine a little bit, but let's talk about right sizing different go to market approaches. And let's assume that there are some folks who are listening, which we know this. There are some folks who haven't really done account based, or they're trying to do account based and it's really more targeted demand gen. It happens. We know that this is real. We've seen the research. How do you typically move from that one to many demand gen type approach into more personalized account based approaches at scale? What do you recommend?
I think it's a hard thing to do because if you jump right to one, I think one to one is the clearest sign to the business that this looks different than demand gen. If you have a custom ebook on a custom landing page and there's advertising running to just one account, that is a big departure from demand gen, whether no matter how you're targeting on the back end. So I think piloting one to one, often you'll see people will pilot with one account, with 5 accounts, maybe pick an account that's not as risky. Like, do you pick one that does have an early stage opportunity in it? So there's some kind of signs of life and engagement there. Do you pick a customer account with a really engaged champion and you do like a cross sell, upsell play? That's a good way to not pick, you could pick the biggest logo you have, but is that setting yourself up for success for the ABM program? I got to the point in one role where, we had proven out the fact that it worked. So I used to tell the reps, give me your worst accounts, give me your hardest accounts, give me the ones you haven't been able to get into in 3 years since you've been calling. So I think once you evolve to get to the trust is built, you have the resources you need to be able to have a couple that don't really go anywhere. But at first, it's not a good place to start to say, let's go for our most complicated account. So I do think starting a pilot with one to one is a good way to demonstrate to the business that this does look really different from demand gen, because programmatic ABM to a seller, I don't know if I'm in their shoes, I might think, okay, that looks good. You're running, you have a account list that's you're running campaigns to. As marketers that are kind of setting it up on the back end, we know there's all kinds of signals going into that to make sure it's the right account list all the time, that accounts are going in and out the way that they should be. So I do think one to one, sort of a low risk one to one pilot is a good way to start. And you don't always even need budget for that, because you can do custom content, you can do, you know, there's plenty of like strong ABM plays that you could run with little or no budget and then start to hopefully ask for it. And then it gets really fun because you can do all kinds of fun custom, custom direct mail, custom webinars for them with certain, giveaways or whatever it might be. There's so much fun tactics that you can run if you have some one-to-one ABM budget. But it is hard to, I think starting is the hardest part. And then once you get a couple wins under your belt, the whole business wants to get behind it and wants to put resources into it. So it's a fun adventure to kick off as a team.
Make ABM fun again. There's another shirt. We're just going to have to start a swag company. The fun point, though, before we pressed record today, you and I were talking about some things that we're dabbling with AI and what we're really excited to start to test. And we get asked this question a ton. What are your favorite AI use cases? But what's something that you're excited about that you're starting to do with AI?
I think the content potential for ABM is huge because, for instance, if you run a custom webinar for an account or for a set of accounts, I think often where webinars drop off is you put so much effort into driving attendance to it, or you just treat the replay like that's enough. We did the webinar, it's over, they can watch it on demand, we're good. The content that you can pull out of a webinar in terms of like what's the recap blog post, what's the one pager or the info, there's so much you could take from that. If you have your SME captive for 30 minutes to talk about a topic, that's there's so much content within that. So I think to me, that's a huge opportunity, especially on the ABM side, where you have a lot of segments that you're looking after. You might have a lot of accounts specifically that you're looking after. So how can you take those like 30-minute moments in time and turn that into a campaign after the fact? Because there's not a lot of just the ideal state for a content creation resource for ABM, you'd have a dedicated ABM content manager. Basically, you're just cranking things out for you on the account level or on the segment level. So we're always looking for content. Typically, I'll take content, tweak it for an account, or put like take an ebook, put a new page in the ebook with a letter from the rep, and then put like a custom cover on it. But the ebook itself is not custom. So I think as account-based marketers, we're always like stealing other people's content and trying to spin something up that feels account-based, where AI represents a chance to flip that and really have more of a custom feeling to that. So I'm excited about that from a ABM point of view.
Definitely. And don't spoil that. Marketers, don't send that to your accounts and tell them that, hey, this is actually
Oh,
98% the same.
I
So
just
it's,
the cover.
yeah.
It's true. I do.
Hey, look, that's the best presenters. A lot of our go-to talk tracks we've done 1,000 plus times, right? Like that's how the world works. One question that we got from the audience, which we get this one a lot, but I'd love to get your take. What are the biggest challenges facing marketers today?
I think everybody's consuming content all day long. Work content, our phones, 30-second, scroll and you forget about it a minute later. I think that is the biggest challenge as marketers, because it's always been important, obviously, since the beginning of time, for marketers to have a message that's relevant to their target and that stands out. But it's just so noisy, not just in the B2B world where you're trying to compete against, your competitor's message or other organizations that are trying to get the attention of your target, but it's also like people's personal, there's just a constant influx of news and of content, and I don't think that's making our jobs easier, but also it's probably making us better marketers, because whatever is working, you kind of have to watch those signals and lean into what you see working, because it's not just a crowded B2B, marketing world. It's also everything else that people are focused on all day long, content wise, is like through the roof. I feel like our attention spans are not as good as we thought.
Yes, totally. I mean, and we've been doing this a long time. The content grind and content shock. I remember when Mark Schaefer coined that term. I mean, it's such a real, true thing. And, I don't want to take all of your time away so you can read lots of great content in the time that you have left for today. But we are going to enter the lightning round now. We have some questions where these are quick hitters. We can go pretty fast, and then we'll build to the most important question. But the first is TechRex. What are some of your favorite tools or technologies that you're using?
Okay. I'm going to say demand base,
Well, thank you.
because I'm talking to you. But that is foundational for a lot of what I'm working on. Additional tools, I've really loved using direct mail platforms in past lives, like Alice and Sendoso. I think I just love direct mail. I love to get it. I love to send it. I think it's fun. And it does help you stand out, whether it's no matter what you send. I think people do remember, on the topic of cutting through the noise of content and digital and everything. But a couple other things that are more kind of ABM centric, account intelligence centric: Pipeline IQ for account profiling, Boardroom Insiders for executive profiling, and I loved Follows for landing page building as well. Super quick to build and just quick to edit, and sellers can get into it too. So those are some of my favorites.
Awesome stuff. The next one we call Goodreads, but it could also be a different format. Is there a book, blog, newsletter, or podcast that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Good question. So this weekend I read Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, I think. Wiseman. But it's all about how leaders are either multiplying the performance of their teams or diminishing the performance of their teams based on how they just trust their team to run and do the thing they're best at, which I feel like should be a must read for any people managers, but also anyone that works with people. Account-based marketers are in the middle of a bunch of different teams. So, even if we don't manage people directly, we're managing big groups of people working towards something. So I just thought that was a really good perspective to kick off the year with.
Love it. Yeah, that one applies personally too, right? I know relationships, coaching, anything. So that's a great recommendation. What about the folks who inspire you in the B2B space? Who would you put on that short list?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of people. I thought about this one. I would say Christian Lowry, who runs the ABM program at CyberArk. He's excellent and just love to like bounce ideas off of him and really strong like foundational ABM knowledge. Um, Becky Martins, who runs revenue marketing at Jellyfish, is amazing. I got a lot of executive engagement kind of tips and tricks from her. And then Rick Catino from Pipeline IQ, he works with an array of account-based marketing teams and sellers and, the biggest organizations in the world. So we worked together, but he has a really good perspective on just what are ABM teams doing right now, what accounts are they focusing on. He kind of like sits in the center of all of it. So those are three that came to mind. I could keep going, but those were my three I landed on.
All right, we'll build a bigger list after the show. But those are great recommendations, great accounts, great people. Nice job there. And then the most important question of all, how can everyone get in touch with you after this podcast?
LinkedIn, probably. Caroline Quinn. LinkedIn is the best way.
Awesome. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for your time today. Great job.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.